pause the recording of his? Maybe that's technical knowledge to pull this off, and it's going to happen. We made the seminar happen. This is going to happen. It's just a little bit slower. So thank you for bearing with us. And welcome to the January Landscape Inspector Association of Florida meeting. Very excited. We've got two very high-powered educational sessions coming at you today. And one of them, the first is Mr. Lynn Griffith. And Lynn is actually in Carolina putting on a presentation up there now, and he's kind of on lunch. So we're going to go straight to Lynn. And if there's any technical difficulties, we'll be here to back him up. So don't go anywhere. Please hang in there. And Lynn, we turn this over to you and enjoy the presentation, y'all.
I don't know.
Lynn, whenever you're ready.
You go.
Oh,
There we go. I can hear him now.
Is there someone ready to change the slides?
yes.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Hit the pause button, the space bar.
Okay, we're good.
Why don't I hear that?
Okay, let's go to let's do the next slide, please. I'll just say next.
Okay.
We're from South Carolina. I am in Columbia, South Carolina, talking to you to give a couple seminars for these folks up here. Next. Okay, today we're going to talk about mineral deficiency disease in South Florida trees and shrubs. We're going to do one on palm deficiency soon. I'd like y'all to tune into that. That's some really cool stuff to show you on that. There won't be any palms today. Feel free to jump in with a question at any time, and I'll be happy to take it. Next. It all starts with soil. The soil testing lab down there for many years. I'm going to talk about soil chemistry, then we get into the horticulture. Next. South Florida soils are generally sandy. They're low organic matter, 10% organic matter. Therefore, our soils typically do not have many binding sites which hold nutrients. Next. Those are soil probe holes in that side, by the way. That's what those. Cation change capacity defined as the ability of a soil to hold and exchange nutrients. Most plant nutrients are positively charged, and therefore they are cations. The negatively charged plant nutrients are primarily nitrate, sulfate, and chloride, but most plant nutrients are charged. We talk about cation exchange capacity. I don't know if it'll work. No, probably not. I was going to do a demo, but I think you all probably have a decent understanding of what exchange capacity is. So next, please. Stay with me. This is going somewhere. This is not going to be a chemistry lecture. Horticulture in South Florida, generally, what binding sites we do have in our soils are dominated by calcium and by sodium. Therefore, it makes it hard for trees and shrubs to find enough magnesium and potassium. That's why these deficiencies are so common in South Florida. That shot is at a hollow field, Wellington. Give these slides myself, and I'll just for local interest when we get to them. Other Colorado soil tendencies, high pH due to large amounts of calcium carbonate in our soils. One of the tricks that I learned a long time ago is that look at the sandy soil for some of lots of shell in it. If you have a lot of shell soil, it's a sign that, you know, the pH may be over 8. It's actually the carbon that makes the soil pH go up, the calcium. Soil test leads to the calcium and the pH vary together, but the reason is that most of that calcium is down to carbonate. And then we'll do the chemistry lesson. Next. The building that I'm in South Carolina is a city building that requires you to wear a mask, not wanting to speak through a mask or a facial. When I lime to a soil, it's not the calcium that makes the pH go up, it's carbonate. pH stands for potential of hydrogen. When you're testing the pH of something, you're actually measuring one hydrogen ions in it. When you apply it to the soil in the form of calcium carbonate, the carbonate binds with hydrogen for bicarbonate. That by definition takes calcium, or sorry, it takes equation, and therefore by definition causes pH to rise.
Can you hear anything? When we hear these bings, are you hearing those bings?
Oh, you could turn it off on yours.
Okay, that's just here.
And they are both about the same size. Therefore, calcium and magnesium are very similar to each other chemically. Next. I'm telling you all this chemistry crap for reasons. Stay with me. Okay, we just went over this. The calcium to magnesium ratio is one of the ratios that I look for. Next. Depending on where you discuss, you may have the soil ratios do not matter. I believe that they do. The calcium to magnesium ratio is one that I look at. If there were the 10 species, some plants have very low magnesium requirements. For example, in 1 year of doing this, I have never seen magnesium deficiency in an oak tree. I don't know why folks can't hear the audio. If there's anything I can do here, let me know. Otherwise, let's go to the next slide. I can be closer to the microphone. Is that any better? I'm about 8 inches from it now. Hopefully we can get fixed. I'm very close. The slide on the left is fascinating to me. One is hemoglobin and the one next to it is chlorophyll. Those molecules are almost identical. One of the main functions of magnesium in plants, middle of the chlorophyll molecule. When a plant runs low in magnesium, it steals the magnesium from the older leaves and moves it into the new leaves. We therefore see a lack of magnesium and thus a lack of chlorophyll in the older leaves. I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of that now. Next. On the left is magnolia. This is in Jupiter Island. Magnolias have requirements. You see that marginal yellowing in the older leaves on the left. The one on the right is Ficus altissima, one of the pin species. This is an older leaf, and you see how there's a lot of loss of chlorophyll in that leaf. The slide on the left here is from the beach. I hope you can see that the older leaves are yellow there. The one on the right is a rubber for plants, or like it's the core with very severe magnesium deficiency. You sort of see that Christmas tree effect along the mid-rib. That's a common symptom. I have oracles of that. Next. And I'll tell you how this in a minute. That's a fascia on the very calcareous. That is Balnesia tree on the right from down in Dade County, very calcareous soil. Next. That's a mulberry tree on the right from Dade with see veins of chlorophyll around them. The area between don't. That's a Dracena Draco on unmuted. I'll go to this slide. Plants are stealing magnesium from the leaves because of low exchange to the soils whose types are dominated by calcium. And there's no magnesium, therefore there's no chlorophyll in the older leaves. People ask me, how can I lower the calcium in my soil? I tell them, move to Georgia. You're going to be able to lower the calcium levels in your soil. We sit on top of limestone aquifer. That's just the way of Florida. Next, please. I assume you're working on path to the next slide. How do we correct magnesium deficiency in trees? One option is kieserite, which is an inexpensive, slow-release magnesium. I am a big K-mag nut. In order to buy, K-mag, to correct both magnesium and potassium deficiencies. K-mag is a natural organic 0022, 11% magnesium. It's mined in New Mexico. Typically, you put it on about 2.5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. For palms, I recommend 1 cup on a small palm, 2 cups on a medium palm, and 3 cups on a large palm. You can also spray or drench with Epsom salts at 2 to 3 pounds per 100 gallons. Generally for trees, I prefer to apply K-mag underneath at 2.5 pounds per 1,000 under and not beyond the drip line. Next, please. It often will take 6 to 9 months to correct a magnesium deficiency in area South Florida soils. This is iron deficiency in ash polyalthea. You can see absorption. Those are areas where droplets and chela were absorbed and the plant is localized, making chlorophyll. I just call these green dots absorption. Iron is the only element that does this. If you spray micronutrients on a tree and you see green dots like that, you know that iron is your problem. That is a maple on the right with severe potassium deficiency. What's going on there is potassium regulates the opening and closing of the stomates. And when the tree is deficient, it cannot close the stomates. And therefore you get the localized necrotic spots that sort of look like fungal leaf spots. They are not. What you tell with the older leaves and the newer leaves, that's how you can distinguish a potassium deficiency from a leaf disease. Those spots are in the older leaf, it's potassium deficiency, please. I think I'm kind of rolling here now. Potassium deficiency in pear. I took that shot in South Georgia. On the right is a guava tree and a guava grove in Homestead. If you look kind of to the upper right and right of the slide and to the very bottom, you'll see purpling older leaves. That is also phosphorescency. The purpling is phosphorescency. The speckling is potassium deficiency. Next, please. We could correct both of these or something similar to that. There's potassium deficiency in Cattleya guava. Again, old leaves, she's sort of randomly distributed in chronic spots. Severe potassium deficient fruit tree on the right, that shot in Dade County. Like, I'd be inclined both spray potassium nitrate or triple 20 on these trees, and broadcast came underneath. Next, please. Sciences Coast has stopped your video. Don't know what's up
No,
with
you're,
that. I'll let our.
you're, okay.
Hey,
No, you're good this way.
South Florida soil. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're
South
fine.
Florida soil. Test 1, 2, 3. Should I keep talking?
Oh, good. You're good.
Okay. South Florida soils are deficient in manganese. That's just the way it is around here. The Ficus rata on the left, you can see the poor color in the new leaves. That is manganese deficiency. The mahogany tree on the right is severely manganese deficient. I took that shot at IBM Boca Raton many years ago. Next, please. There's manganese deficiency in sago. That shot was from Boca Raton near my house. Sago is a manganese deficient, and they sort of get full top, and they all normally the manganese deficiency. You would spray manganese sulfate at a half pound per gallons, or they sell their manganese sulfate at just about all box stores down here. You can broadcast. I remember manganese is a micronutrient, not a nutrient, so you don't need real high rate. This is white bird of paradise leaf on the right. Although white and orange bird suffer from calcium deficiency, leaves get distorted like air. Look funny. In calcareous soils, they won't do that, but calcium builds strong bones and teeth. And I would calcium nitrate or calcium. In the case of calcium deficiency, the nitrate at 2.5 pounds per 100 gallons. The T100 would be and gypsum sulfate. If it's a tree situation, I've had gypsum at 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet under the canopy, and the calcium won't fix the distorted leaf, but the new leaves will come out normal. Next, please. Deficiency. There's boron deficiency on the left and very severe boron deficiency on the right. The next can change that, please. We'll talk a little more briefly about boron. Boron is a different kind of micronutrient. I'll keep going until the light comes up. Boron is the only micronutrient that leaches. Iron doesn't leach, manganese doesn't leach, copper doesn't leach, zinc doesn't leach, molybdenum doesn't leach, boron. Boy, have we had a deficiency in 2020 because it had about 70 inches of the boron out of the soil, and susceptible plants will certainly have related issues. Simple way to fix boron deficiency is go public.
All right, all. We thought, I'll take off my mask. We thought 2020 was behind us, but you know, some things are residual from 2020. Lynn is having a little bit of connections problems, as you can tell. Hopefully, you're getting a lot of the information from the slides. He's kind of resorted down to more or less getting his information straight off the slide, so there's not too much more out there. But Lynn is super knowledgeable, as you all know, and that's the information we really want to glean from him. But in this case, pay attention to the slides, listen to what he's got, and hopefully his connection will improve, and we'll get a whole lot more good information.
Hopefully I'll see him back.
Yeah, hopefully he's able to sign back on. In the meantime, never to let dead air go by the waste. When Richard tells me that Lynn is back on, I will mute myself. For those of you that are unaware, we got from Sharon Vollmer, Coconut Creek, we got a copied on a newspaper article that came out. There are two people in the Florida legislature that are trying to update the new tree law, 16145, and there, I don't know how far along it's going, but I'll make that available, the link available on the website. And for people that are in favor of modifying or overturning that rule, I would suggest you reach out to these. One is a House bill and one is a Senate bill, to show your support or your disapproval if you don't want it to go that way, so that these people can get this done in this legislative session.
Let's see if Lynn is okay.
Right.
Hold on, I'm gonna.
Lynn may be back. Then I will.
I am hearing you guys.
You're on. You
Can
got.
you hear me? All right. I don't need video of me. So let's continue. Metallic micronutrient, and it's the only one that tends to be anionic in soil. You could buy a 50-pound bag of soluble, but you'd leave it to your grandchildren. Nutrition, get 20 mule team borax. Next, please. I'll jump the guys in a little bit. There we go. Borax is 11% boron. It's inexpensive grocery store. Or typically, you top dress a palm with about a half a spoon or about level for X. No more micronutrient toxicity, common nutrients. Don't get crazy with borax. And you will boron deficient. Next. Okay, manganese deficiency in Clusia. There's also manganese that I hope you can see in the slide, which is manganese deficiency. Clusia doesn't absorb foliar nutrients worth a flip. I would best say underneath those plants. On the coffee plant, Coffea arabica, with very severe potassium deficiency, I would potassium nitrate a pound and a half per 100 gallons there, and also broadcast cane, the coffee plants, 0.5 pounds per 1,000 feet. Next. Remember, in Florida, all these deficiencies I'm showing to soil conditions in 5 industry ways. Hong Kong orchid trees are almost all deficient in both magnesium and potassium. The potassium deficiency is that marginal plant potassium leaves, and that yellowing in the older leaves is magnesium deficiency. Leaves that look fine, but these again get your K-mag. The slide on the right side is a Nora Grant Agora. I'll keep talking about it. We went past it. Red blotches you get on Nora Grant primarily in the wintertime. That's not a fungus. Tim Brochat showed that that was a deficiency of both phosphorus and methane. Spray 2 pounds of 20 gallons, or about a tablespoon per gallon. The spotted leaves on spot, but all the new leaves are at normal. Here, iron deficiency in soils above about 7.5 pH. You'll probably want to use an iron chelate. The chelate is EDDHA. Most of the iron chelate use, but EDDHA does. You can get that as sequestrine 130.
So when,
Lid, just want to check you're still there, okay?
would it be a surprise if I told you I think we lost Lynn again? So somewhere the internet service doesn't like cold weather in Carolina either. Again, I apologize. As Lynn said earlier, we will be having him back on to do a palm session. So maybe we can kind of expand that and have him go over these canopy tree deficiencies as well in a future presentation. We are going to reach out to Lynn. I know he, like I said, he is actually doing a presentation up there for a couple groups, a live presentation. So I know he was going to have to end in about 8 minutes. So we're going to reach out to him, see if he's going to link back on. If not, we will switch to another session. So good time for a bathroom break. Hold on, y'all.
And make sure you.
All right, so I've opened, yeah, I unmuted. So I've opened the chat just to see if there were some questions y'all had that want to come in that we can hopefully help you with. In the meantime, while I've got a somewhat captive audience here of LIAF professionals, I want to remind you of a couple things. One, it is the new year. Don't forget to pay your dues. We are trying to, very hard, with Richard's help, drive a lot of the traffic to our webpage. If you have not been on the webpage in a while, it's greatly improved. There's a lot of very functional things on there. In addition to be able to sign up or find links to these meetings, then you can also pay your dues. And as we move forward with other things such as seminar, which will be several months away, but will be again this year, not live. I think we're looking at a virtual seminar again for 2021 until they get this virus better under control. You'll be able to keep tabs on your CEUs, keep tabs on your dues, whether you're paid or not. And for those of you that are certified members, you put those two together. As long as you've obtained your 24 CEUs over a 3-year period and are current every year on your dues, then you maintain your certification. Kevin is the certification chair, and you should receive every 3 years, you would receive a new certification from LIAF. If you have not or you're behind, please reach out to us. I normally forward those emails to Richard if you're having trouble signing in or anything else. If you have questions because you don't have CEUs or you did not get credit for CEUs you felt that you earned, we have a group that's put together for that as well to review and try and make sure that everybody that is certified, that works to keep their certification, will indeed remain certified. So that is my push for dues and the website. So I'm going to put you back on hold, and I'm going to see if we can find our next speaker who is local, and hopefully we'll have a strong connection. All right, hold on.
Okay. I guess I'm supposed to get started here.
Go ahead, Bill. Rich, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, it was all
Excellent.
quiet and everything. So yeah, we're good.
We were having a meditation moment prior to you coming on. So,
Okay, it's all good. It's good to do that every once in a while.
Rich, I'm going to turn it over to you with no further ado. I think due to the poor internet connection we had before, people will be super glad to hear a good, strong connection and a good.
Okay, I will share my screen. I hope you're seeing a slideshow about orchids. That's my plan. Is that working for you?
Yes, you're on, and you're the host.
Okay, terrific. That's great. Well, thank you for having me here today. Let me just got to get my screen organized just a minute here. I need to see my PowerPoint somewhere other than in Zoom so I can make it work. View, window, here we go. Bring to front. Oh, okay, there we go. So we're good. Okay, so everything looks good here. So hi, everybody. My name is Rich Ackerman. I am the president of the Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society. I am also a Florida Master Gardener volunteer here in Broward County. And so this talk is about a joint effort that our Orchid Society is doing with Fairchild Tropical Botanic Gardens, where we've become a partner of theirs, bringing Million Orchid Project to Broward County. So I'm going to talk about a few things here in this presentation. And if I can get my slide to work here. So this is basically the overview of what I'm going to do. Just talk a little bit about botany and propagation. It's important to understand a little bit about orchids. They're kind of weird plants. And so some of their reproductive cycles are different than what you all are probably used to. And then I'll talk about the history of the Million Orchid Project, which is really fascinating. It's a native orchid conservation project. It's probably the largest orchid restoration project in the world at this point. And then at the end, I'll talk about some examples of projects that we're doing with other groups and sort of like how you all might get involved in this. Now, I'm mostly focusing on Broward County. I'm not sure if this is like a statewide conference here or if this is like a Broward chapter. So if you're elsewhere in the state, enjoy. But if you're in Broward, take notes and give me a call so you can get some orchids at the end of the day. So that's what we're going to do. So let's talk about botany. So orchids in general, Orchidaceae is a big family. 800 genera, 28,000 species. There are probably well over 100,000 hybrids that have been registered. There's a registry in England, a Kew, where they keep track of all the hybrids that people make. And there's a lot of awards given. There's all kinds of stuff in that world. But we're talking about native species, which is a little bit different. In Florida here, according to USF, we have 56 genera of native orchids, 120 species. There are at least 120 orchids that are living and reproducing in Florida. Some of them are invasive, so we actually have invasive orchids in Florida. Eulofia graminea is probably the worst one. That's like the little Chinese crown one that comes up in the mulch. You see that all the time, and that's been in Florida for about 12 years now, 15 years now. It came in Miami, and it's actually spread all the way up into Georgia. So it's doing a very, very good job of spreading the way that invasive plants do. Most of the orchids that we deal with down here in southeastern Florida, southern Florida, are epiphytic. We have a semi-tropical or tropical, even tropical climate. And so the orchids can survive on the trees. Further sort of north of Ocala, kind of a borderline, there's a lot more terrestrial orchids, and up through the country, there's a lot more terrestrial sort of wildflower type orchids. Orchids are very highly specialized as to the locales where they live, their germination needs, how they germinate, and pollination strategies. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of that stuff. When we're talking about orchid reproduction, so we're doing an orchid restoration project. We're putting thousands of orchids into the urban landscape of South Florida. The Million Orchid Project at Fairchild is literally shooting for 1 million orchids. And so you have to be able to make 1 million orchids if you want to plant 1 million orchids in your urban landscape. So I'm going to talk about how it works in nature and then how it works in the lab so that there's a difference. Symbiotic orchid reproduction is how it works in nature. They're all flowering plants. They get pollinated, seeds are developed inside the ovary, and then there's a maturation process where the seed capsules develop. Usually like 4 months is pretty typical amount of time for the orchids in Florida anyway. There's some that are very, very fast and there's some that are slower, but it's usually 4 or 5 months. So if that means that if you're seeing flowers in April or May, then you need to count out like 4 months from there, 5 months from there, if you want to be collecting seed capsules and using those seeds for propagation. The seed structure for an orchid is very different than your typical monocot. So all orchids are monocots. Monocots are things like corn and peas, and the seed of the typical monocot has a lot of food in it that helps the seed when it first germinates. And you can see in the slide that this large mass is the endosperm, which is really the food for the plant as it emerges from the seed. The bottom picture shows a sort of a microelectron microscope shot of an orchid seed. And you can see there's a seed coat, which is basically two cells wide usually. So it's very thin seed coat. There's a nucleus in the middle of it that is actually the DNA that's going to turn into the orchid. And then all the rest of it is just basically air. There's no endosperm in it. And so there's no food to go along. So when this seed germinates, it needs to do something for food. It's not self-contained. When the seed capsules mature, they split open and the seeds disperse in the wind. They're little dust particles. When I do this talk live, I actually pass around orchid seeds and they're just like, they look like little pieces of dust. They're just tiny, tiny, tiny. When the seed capsules open up, the seeds don't fall to the ground. They just kind of float. They float away in the wind, in the air. And it's really great to see. It's really cool to see. It's a violation of the laws of physics, but it works. And then, so we've said there's no endosperm, there's no food. Well, how do they germinate? What do they do when they germinate? And so for an orchid seed to germinate, it needs to land right next to a specific type of mycorrhizal fungi. And the fungus and the seed have a sort of symbiotic relationship where they help each other. And there's a lot of research on this, and I'm not a botanist, so I'm not going to pretend to explain or claim that I understand how it works. But the important point is that the seed has to land right next to the right kind of fungus. And if you don't have that fungus, then you can make seeds all day long, but they'll never, ever germinate. So you'll never get baby orchids. So that's kind of how it works in nature. The whole process is a very lengthy one. I had been growing orchids for like 10 years, and I sort of was a gardener, and then I really got into orchids, and I kind of went back to gardening again. And I like rediscovered the joy of a seed that you could just like put in the ground and it grows, and it's like, it doesn't take, years and years and years for something to happen. But orchids take years and years and years for something to happen. When they're hybridizing and producing plants for trade, one of the things they optimize is for time to flower. So they don't have to keep plants in the greenhouse for 4 years. So if they get one that blooms early, they'll clone it and sell it because they can save time and save money. So that's kind of sort of how it works in nature. In a lab, it's a little bit different. In a lab, you take the seed and working in a sterile environment, put it through a process of transplanting, basically. So in this diagram that I borrowed from Fairchild, oops, my bad. You can see that you start with one seed capsule, and this is maybe, some of the bigger ones are the size of your thumb. Some of the smaller ones are like the size of your one joint on your pinky. I mean, they can be pretty small. And each of those seed capsules can have thousands and thousands of seeds in them. There's one orchid that actually has upwards of 4 million seeds in a single seed capsule. So you take the seed in a sterile environment, in a laminar flow hood, sterilize it, cut it open, and put it into a flask that's called a mother flask, or it's got a germination media in it, sort of like an agar in the bottom. And you sprinkle these seeds on and then let them go for a while. And they form little protocorms. They don't actually start making plants. They first make little things like BBs that are called protocorms. And then you transplant the protocorms into vessels that have growth media instead of germination media. And you can see in the chart, you really get exponential growth as you're doing these transplants. So you can take one fruit, make 10 mother bottles, and then from those 10, you can get another 50 bottles easily of just taking the protocorms and transplanting them into new flasks. And then as those grow bigger, you need to separate them. And again, you get out to, like this diagram shows, 250 bottles. Each bottle has probably 25 plants in it. So you're looking at thousands. This is 6,000 plants probably coming out of one seed. And the pictures here are, in the top picture is showing you what the flasks look like in various stages of growth. And then after they're taken out of the flask, they get put into these trays and they grow for a little while under lights in those trays. Finally, so this is all done, these pictures were taken at Fairchild. Most of this work is done for us and for Fairchild, actually at a lab in the Dominican Republic. They are the only people that have the volume and the space in their greenhouses to do the quantity that Fairchild needs. So when I collect seed, I actually send it up to Maryland. They do the mother flasking in Maryland, and then it gets shipped to Dominican Republic to grow out. It comes to us in trays, like those trays on the bottom there. This is a shade house here where we harden stuff off. So we get plants from Fairchild, and we will, sometimes they're bare roots, sometimes they're already potted, but we will grow them out and harden them off, get them used to a transition from a greenhouse out into a sort of more open air environment. And this is some pretty typical trays of Encyclia tampensis, which is the sort of the most common native orchid here in Broward County. And you can see this is a 72 pack, 72 tray, 72 cell tray. And this one, the one on the right, you can see actually had a flower on it. So this was a shipment of 1,000 orchids that I got this summer. And there were 6 or 7 that were actually in bloom already, that were flowering out. So these plants are small, but at this point they're 3 years old. These orchids are 3 years old, and they're actually almost flowering size. Now, when you take an orchid out of a tray like this and you put it in a tree, which is what we do, then the orchid is going to spend its time and energy establishing a new root structure. So it's not going to bloom the first year, but if you get it out early in the rainy season, it has a really good growing year, it can bloom either the following year or the year after that. But they're mature enough to bloom. It just is, they need to get adapted to the environment. So that's kind of sort of how we do it, how we grow them. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the project, because this is kind of fun too. So Million Orchid Project started at Fairchild. Dr. Jason Downing is the orchid biologist, and he and the executive director got some money to build a science building in around 2010, and they went around the world and trying to figure out, like, what are the good gardens doing with science buildings these days. So they went to Singapore, among the many other places they visited, and Singapore had a great orchid project like the Million Orchid Project. And so Fairchild decided, hey, we should do this, and came back, and as part of the new science building that they put up, almost 10 years ago now, they have a nice micropropagation lab and a lot of space for orchids. So they established this goal. Their first one, where they put up in April of 2014. So they've been at it for 6.5 years now. As I mentioned earlier, their goal is to put 1 million orchids into the urban environment of Miami-Dade County. And it's urban. The key thing is it's an urban project. It's not like going out into the Fakahatchee or going out into the Everglades or Cypress or Big Cypress or Corkscrew or anything like that. There's a lot of interesting, good projects where people are putting plants back and restoring populations in those environments. But the focus of Million Orchid Project and what we're doing here in Broward County is really urban. We're in the cities, we're in parks, we're in residential neighborhoods, and so it's very, very much urban. And it's a science experiment, honestly. It's worked out very well in Singapore. The plants that they put out are doing extremely well. The early results from Miami are also very, very good. They have a lot of plants that are flowering now, that are plants that they've put out, and they're getting seed capsules. There are some little seedlings that have set in Fairchild from some of their orchids, and they're hoping to see seedlings getting established in some of the sites that they've been working on, within the next year or two. They take a very education-oriented approach. They have school kids involved with it, and a lot of outreach activity. There've been literally thousands of volunteers involved through Fairchild's. And so it's it's a large project. And the last number I heard was 270,000 orchids that they've put up. So it's a lot of orchids. We're hoping to do a pretty constant run rate of about 10,000 a year, but they're more ambitious than we are. So, and this is kind of a little bit of the lay of the land. So Fairchild is in Miami. They cover Miami-Dade. Because they're tied to the school system, and they sort of stayed in Miami-Dade. And I've heard from people over the years that had tried to reach out to Jason, tried to reach out to Fairchild. from Broward or from Palm Beach and kind of just never got a response. And they really do focus on Miami-Dade. Then about 4 years ago, up at Pine Jog in Palm Beach, they started a project working with Fairchild, and they have developed it into something called Orchids, which is also educationally focused. They have a lab at Pine Jog Environmental Education Center. It's a really, really lovely facility. If you're ever up there, I would recommend going and visiting. They have a really nice sort of parkland, like meadow kind of landscape, and they've got a lot of orchids out in there, some boardwalks, a lot of mixed terrain, and they're doing a lot of propagation and a lot of restoration work in Palm Beach County. And so then Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society has been working in Broward County now. And we're coming into our third season of doing plantings. And we've been focused more on civic associations, residential, so, homeowners associations like that, than the education system that the other ones are doing. So in Florida, as I mentioned before, there's about 120 species. They used to be absolutely everywhere in South Florida. There was an abundance of orchids that was mind-blowing. The early days, when Flagler brought the railroads down, they were bringing building supplies. There was a huge building boom in South Florida, and they were bringing building supplies down on the train, and they needed stuff to take back. So one of the things that they took back were orchids. It became very fashionable to have orchids in your house. And of course, they would go into the Fakahatchee or Everglades and just strip out these plants that were, 100 years old, 200 years old, and take them up north, and they would have them for a season, they would bloom, and then they would die and they get thrown away. So poaching was probably the earliest, predation. And there just was not, it's not like they were bad people or anything like that. It was just a different time. There was an abundance. There was just not the mindset of conservation there is today. Now they're much rarer, but they're still around. I can go into almost any park in Broward County and find some Encyclia tampensis. If there's oak trees, I can usually find some tampensis, but that's about all that's left. Loss of pollinators is a threat. If you don't have pollinators, you're not going to make babies. Invasive plants, that happened in my very yard. I live in a hammock, and when I moved in 30 years ago, it was full of a creeping vine that had smothered all the native plants in the trees. The people that had owned the house for 50 years before I got it said that the trees used to be full of orchids, and these vines had just killed them all. So that's a very real thing that happens. The mycorrhizal fungi we talked about already. If there's that fungus isn't around, well, they're not going to reproduce. Poaching we've talked about, and habitat loss is huge too. And this is a map that I borrowed from Richard Brownscombe, an article that he wrote. And it's sort of a map of Broward County in 1943. The top shows all the natural areas that there were, and it was like almost all natural areas. And then the bottom shows what's left for natural and wild areas in Broward County. There's a little bit of water out west. But if you know your park system, basically all that you see that's left are the parks. So there's no conservation, where you can go in and buy, 100 acres to set it aside. That just doesn't happen in Broward County anymore. So we're going into neighborhoods, we're going into urban areas, going into parks, and putting these plants back into the environments because there just is no wild land left. So that's that. I have to have flowers. Everybody wants flowers. If you see an orchid talk, you want to see orchids. These are some of the species that Fairchild is propagating. The first two are the most common, Encyclia tampensis and Oncidium insatum. So we see those. Oh, there's a typo there I've never seen before. Oh well, it's insatum, not insaturm. But anyway, the cigar orchid is a really pretty one. This is Certipodium punctatum, and the pine pink is a really pretty little thing. And we're in Fort Lauderdale, we're also propagating vanilla. So there's 4 native vanillas in Florida, and we're doing some propagation. We're growing out divisions of that for some of our partners. So those are sort of what the flowers look like. We joined in 2018, and collecting seeds is a big process. You have to have permits from the state. You need to be registered. It's a lot of paperwork to go through. And so we did all of that and basically started collecting seed and sending them off to the labs to get them grown out. As I said, it takes a few years. So we're just sort of starting to see the flood of plants now from work that we did 3 years ago. The picture with the ruler are some of the seed capsules I collected from Encyclia Tampensis. I collected them right in the middle of downtown Fort Lauderdale, right off of Las Olas Boulevard. There's a big colony. The top picture shows the colony, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's seed capsules. Oops, my mouse just is a little jittery here. There's a lot of seed capsules up in this tree. So you just go and you need permission of the landowner and but you can go and basically clip them and take them. And so now we're getting plants from seed, grown from seed that we collected here in Fort Lauderdale. So we're pretty excited about that because it's a little genetic variation, a little different than Miami. Fairchild did not want to flood Broward County with Encyclia Tampensis that had Miami DNA, just in case there is any difference. So now we're bona fide Broward DNA, and we'll be putting out this summer, this coming year. Like I said, we've been doing it for a while. These are some of the installations that we've done, and I have a few pictures later on. Broward College, the city of Weston, thank you, Thad. Cooley Hammock is a neighborhood. Riverlands Manors, HOA. Sunson, I'll show you some Sunson stuff in a minute. River Oaks, another extension project I'll talk about in a minute, and Equality Garden Club. So we have a lot of different partners, and we're open to more. I mean, that's sort of why I'm talking here today. We are expecting at least 10,000 orchids this summer, and we have commitments for about 6,500 right now. So we have maybe 3,000 orchids that are available for projects. So if you live in Broward County and you want to do a project, let me know and we can do something. Stunson is where we've put in the most orchids so far. They branded it as the Parade of Orchids, this project. And it's very cool. They crowdsourced the fundraising for it. So they have raised about $8,000, $8,500 to date through $5, $10, $20 donations. And we worked up there last year with them, put in about 2,000 orchids. They have a volunteer committee in the city, and a volunteer coordinator. And so we went up and basically trained the volunteer coordinator and one of the parks managers in how to do the installations. We did a site visit, we did an analysis, and kind of worked with them to get it going. And then they did on a weekly basis, they just met every Wednesday morning and would go out and put up 200 orchids or 300 orchids, something like that. So it worked out really well. It's a pretty picture there. That's sort of what the trail looks like. It's about 1/4 mile long. On the left is what I think is a laurel oak. And in that laurel oak, there's probably 40 or 50 orchids. So we plant them in clumps. We don't plant them like one in one tree and one in another. The idea is to establish colonies. So we'll plant 10 of them together on a branch, and then maybe on another branch put another 10. And they don't all survive. Everyone is different. They're grown from seed. But the idea is that there will be enough will survive, so we'll get a colony. And when they flower, it'll be easy for the pollinators to find other flowers and to do cross-pollination. So that's Stunson, Oakland Park. Recommend it. It's a really great place to visit. This is a new project that we're working on. We're really super excited about. Many of you probably know Lorna Bravo, and you all certainly know Florida Friendly Landscaping. So we're working with the Broward County Extension Office to have what they call the Native Orchid Project, which is basically taking our orchids and making them available to folks that are doing FFL. So we're working on this right now. We're building a lot of the documentation, the toolkits, making some videos and stuff. And this is going to be sort of like a retail operation where it's going to be for the individual resident. All of the stuff that we've done, the Orchid Society, have been projects of like 500 orchids and more. And so we haven't really wanted to be doing, 20 orchids or 30 orchids for an individual homeowner because it just doesn't scale very well. But through the extension, with the supportive extension, we're going to be selling kits to homeowners, and we'll have little educational workshops, and we'll have a drive-through to pick stuff up. So we're really excited about that. The sales from this project are going to be going into a scholarship fund for the Florida Master Gardeners in Broward County. So Lauren has been establishing a scholarship program. This year is the first year we have scholarships. Our Orchid Society has endowed one of the scholarships that exists, and this project will hopefully generate revenue for them so they can support more scholarships for the Master Gardener program. This is kind of the dream here. This is not a Million Orchid Project plant, but it is something we did in our Orchid Society in 2015. It was the 100th year anniversary of Broward County's being established. And so the city was, or the county was having all these Broward 100 events. So I got the idea of like doing a native plant project. So we went and we actually bought 100 Encyclia tampensis and set up a little park, set up a booth in a park, and did a promotional thing where we taught residents how to take care of these plants and how to, so we introduced 100 plants out into Broward County. And this is one of those plants. This is a photo from last summer. The top one is the flowers showing how they bloom. And then the bottom one actually shows seed capsules. So this plant had 23 seed capsules on it. And if you remember back the math of like how many seeds are in a capsule, there's probably 10,000 in each of these little seed capsules. So this is maybe 250,000 seeds that from this one plant that got dispersed in Hollywood. This is growing in Hollywood. So this is the kind of thing that we want to see happening everywhere. And if we have a lot of these all over Broward County, these plants will come back. We'll see a lot more of them around. So that's kind of it. The last thing is kind of like, who can be involved? How can you help if you're interested in this project? And like I said, we're really Broward focused. But if you're any of these things, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to work with you. We're working with garden clubs now, working with orchid societies. We have plans for next year to do a really big assisted living facility, schools, a bunch of HOAs we're working with, and civic associations, and cities. So we're pretty much doing all of this already. But like I said, we've still got plants. And so if you want to get involved with the project, just let me know. This is what we do. If you want to do something like this, we can come and do a site visit. We'll come and look at your terrain, look at wherever you're thinking about putting them, figure out species that will work, figure out quantities, locations, all of that. We give talks. I do a lot of these talks. I'm glad to do that. Then we'll do the train the trainer, sort of like I mentioned at Stunson, where we will train folks in what to do and kind of work with them for the first couple of sessions so that they get really good at it. It's not hard, but if it's done wrong, the plants don't live. So you want to do it right. We provide initial supplies, culture information, and then we'll schedule deliveries for your project. So that's what we'll do for you to help you out. This is kind of what it looks like from your side. Like if you want to have a group or a city government that gets involved, this is kind of sort of the path that you go down. Is like scope out the project, let's work with us. We come and do a site visit. We'll figure out like quantities and types of orchids, get some commitment for funding and for the initial care. And I'll talk about financing in the next slide, I think. When the plants are put in, they do need watering. They need to be watered in. And if we do it during the rainy season, so if it's raining, they don't need any supplemental water. But if it gets hot for 2 or 3 days, like it does sometimes, then you need to have a plan to water them, because when they're young, they're not that resilient. Once they're established on the trees, they're fine. They can live on their own. They're very low maintenance. You want to develop some policies, and these are the kinds of things that people, need to figure out. We do have, our Orchid Society has an insurance policy, so we can provide waivers for $1 million, which is what cities typically want. We name the city as a, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know that stuff, but we can get your name, we get you an insurance coverage with your city's name on it, so that would work. And then basically we'll just agree on, we'd write up a little memo of understanding and an agreement on how many you want, when you want them, and we'll be good to go. This is finances. So how does it work financially? Nobody's really in it to make a lot of money, but we are in it to keep our organizations solvent. So we can't be losing a lot of money. We buy our plants from Fairchild. And so we basically sell our plants to our partners at our cost, plus a little bit more to cover all this stuff that happens, like plants that die. We've got our seedlings up until this year have been $3. This year we have a verbal agreement. I don't have it on writing yet, but we have verbal agreement to get a lower price on volume. So we should be able to offer them to our partners at quantity 1,000 for $275. The other species pricing varies according to the size of the plant. And but it just depends on how big they are, how long they've been in the greenhouse, what the species is, how rare they are. Typically, like for estimating purposes, we use $4 a plant. So if you're looking at 500 plants, we figure it'd be about $2,000. And that'll be down a little bit lower. At 500, it would still be about $4 a plant. And most of them are encyclia. Most of the plantings that we do are encyclia tepensis. That's really the bread and butter orchid. So sizing, and we've talked about this already, mostly. The neighborhood projects have all been about 500 or 600 orchids, a couple $1,000s. Oakland Park, the Stunson project that I showed you, is a $10,000 project, probably gonna end up being about 3,000 orchids. We have plans for this year, and we do stage the delivery, so we're not gonna like dump 1,000 orchids in your, in your backyard. So we'll work on a delivery schedule so that you get plants sort of as you need them. And not like weekly, but monthly deliveries maybe. If you have a big order, break it up into thirds or something like that. And then, so this is one example. This is a project that we're working on now with Equality Garden Club. That's just a really nice example of how it works. We've been working with them for 6 or 7 months probably, in terms of education and getting their club up to speed on the project. We went to the Parks Division and got the park support, and we actually have a presentation for the city commissioners next week or 2 weeks from now to get it all finalized. Basically, this is a garden club in Wilton Manors, and they're buying 1,000 orchids, and they're going to do the installation in a city park. And then they have volunteers that will go and water them as needed. So it's a really nice kind of collaboration between a garden club that's heavily involved in the community. I mean, they've done a lot of community projects. They have a really good reputation. It's a great group of people, and a city. So the cities are pretty hard pressed these days, but you can find partners, a garden club is working with Wilton Manors. Oakland Park, we did it through crowdfunding. So there's ways to do it. So this is just a nice example of what we're doing this year, kind of thing that you can do. And then last but not least, there are a few things that people usually want to know about, like, are iguanas a problem? And iguanas love hibiscus. They love dendrobiums, but we don't have any native dendrobiums. So we have not seen any real issues with iguanas going after our orchids. We've planted ground orchids in areas that have iguanas. We planted tree orchids in areas with iguanas. And the iguanas pretty much don't mess with them. They don't like them. It's an acquired taste, I guess, and they haven't acquired it yet. So hopefully you won't have a problem with iguanas. Squirrels are another matter. The squirrels are really, can be very, very pesky, I guess. They have the little runways on their branches, and if you put plants there, they get upset and, they stop and they chatter and stuff. Sometimes they'll steal tags, but iguanas are okay. Survival rates, people always say, oh, what if one dies? Well, some of them will die. They're seedlings. They're all different. They're not monoclonal. They're not clones that we don't grow 1,000 and take the strongest one and clone it. Everyone is unique. Everyone is different. There's strong plants. There's weak plants. The idea of planting a colony is that the strong ones are going to make it. The ones that are suited to that environment are going to make it. And the ones that don't make it, don't make it. If you have 5 out of 10 that survive and you get a great colony growing there, that's a success. That's a win. Height of installations this is always a question, and theft. In Miami, the experience they've had has been very good. The theft has not been a problem nearly to the extent that they thought it would be. Stuff does get taken every once in a while. So the recommendation from Fairchild is if you're putting orchids into a very heavily trafficked area that's open to the public and there's no supervision or anything like that, then get at least up on a step ladder, if not on an extension ladder, and get them up high into the tree canopy. We've done a lot in residential areas where we're putting the orchids in basically at street level, step ladders maybe. And we've not had any problems to date with people taking them. So, it's an issue, but it's something to work through. And that's it. Those are the questions that I get commonly asked. And I think that's the end of my presentation. It is indeed. So if anybody has any questions, I don't see a chat window here on the screen right now. I'm glad that everything worked. I hope everybody could hear me. I did just...
Rich, if you've got a minute, indeed, there have been some questions come in that I've written down, and I'll open it up to everyone now.
Yeah, absolutely.
While we're doing great.
Yeah.
First of all, very good presentation. I thank you for that. Our first question came from Jill Cohen, and she's asking, are there incentives for developers to put orchids into their development? So would the state, county, or local governments in any way have any incentives?
Great question, and I would say I don't know of any, but it's sort of not my area of expertise. So I would say any grant or any kind of support project that talks about native plants, these are native plants, so these would be eligible. So if you have a landscaping project where you've got 50% set aside for native plants, and then these could be included in that native plant allocation. If there's a grant that maybe you have a park and you have a grant that's working on a native planting where they're taking out invasives and putting in native plants, these are native plants, so they would qualify under that kind of grant program. I don't know of any of those because that's kind of not, it's not, like I said, it's not really my area of expertise. But I think anything that talks to native plants, which is certainly a big theme in landscaping these days, and these plants would be eligible for to be included in that kind of thing.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question from I'm a Nick. I assume either he's Nick or he's a New York Nick fan, and he's asked, do we have the right mycorrhizal in our urban settings to help orchid populations continue to increase?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of research being done on that right now. And in Simplex Tempensis, the answer is definitely yes. That's the most common one. That's the one we're planting out. And it turns out that some research at Fairchild has found that a relationship between the orchids and the resurrection ferns especially in live oak. So when in the old hammocks and the old parks throughout Broward County, where you have stands of oak, you have the resurrection fern that, it turns all brown and shrivelly when it's dry, and then as soon as it rains, it magically turns green. It's a really cool plant. That resurrection fern uses the same fungi that Encyclia tempensis do. And so we find in nature, that's a really great way to find orchids. If you're out just hunting and you want to find some, look for the resurrection fern because it's easier to see that. And then you can pick out colonies of Encyclia tempensis in the resurrection fern. But it's our expectation that by planting these out and getting basic colonies going again where they can create seed, that they will go out and be able to make make new orchids. That the fungi will be there. Some of the other ones are kind of a stretch. Like we're planting some orchids that are really from the Fakahatchee and from the Everglades. And with the climate changes that are happening, we're seeing the grow zones, the climate zones kind of shift north. The warmer climates are coming up. So we're putting some plants out in Broward County that really were not native to Broward County, but they were native to Monroe or Miami-Dade. And I don't think that I wouldn't expect those to actually be successful in reproduction. It'd be great if it happened, but it's probably a stretch. But certainly Encyclia, the pine pinks would definitely do it. The Oncidium should do it. So yeah, I think that yes, we are expecting to see, in 5 to 10 years, we're expecting to see orchid seedlings growing in Broward County from these plants.
Excellent. We have a question from David Jones, and he's saying, after installation, what guidelines or recommendations do you provide for maintaining the orchids?
Okay, yeah, I kind of talked briefly about that. And really watering is the only issue. And we plant pretty much exclusively during the rainy season, so that all they really need is supplemental water. If it's rainy, they don't need water, they don't need anything. If it dries out, then they do need some water. Once they're, like for the first summer, you want to be, paying attention to the weather and making sure that they've got moisture. The roots, I've watched really closely, and I've seen roots attach, new roots coming out of a bulb, pseudobulb, attached to a tree in 7 days. So these orchids want to be on a tree. Once the root is growing on the tree, when it rains, the water is absorbed up through the roots, and then they all have what are called pseudobulbs, and that's really a water storage mechanism. So once they have roots, they're capable of saving water from the rain and storing it in their bulbs. That said, young plants don't have huge root systems. It doesn't hurt to water them. I live in neighborhoods and I tell people, it's been dry for 2 weeks. Why don't you give your plants a squirt? So it doesn't hurt to do that. It will only make them grow well, grow better. After the first year, I think they're probably really, really well established. I have some in my yard that I just don't even think about anymore. I never do anything to them and they're doing fine.
Rich, would you then encourage, or as part of installation, if you're looking at a municipal project, an irrigation like a head run up a tree, and so you can irrigate, or you can hose, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen some installations where they did that, where they put up irrigation for the first year, and that was successful. It really depends on kind of what the environment is. They don't need lots and lots of water. You can't really get them too wet though. I mean, that's a good thing. It's like they're not gonna, even if you have them on a timer and you're running water, twice a week for the first summer, they're not gonna rot or anything like that. If it's a rainy week and you run your sprinkler, it's just more water. So they're not gonna rot out. But that would really just be like for the first year to automate something like that, and then after that you could take it down and move it to your next batch of orchids that you're putting on.
Got another question. Are there native orchids for saw palmetto / pine ecosystems?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The Certipodium punctatum is a really great one for palm. They for the sable palm type things. They grow in the little, I don't know what they're called, the little pockets that up the trunk. We've put about 20 of those out in Broward County last year, and most of them are doing pretty well. A couple of them have disappeared. I don't know if somebody, it wasn't people, but I think critters may have taken them or something, because we put those all up high. So those do really well. And then slash pine is definitely a host plant for Encyclia tempensis. We have some in Stunson, they're doing well. And also, if you know War Memorial Auditorium in Fort Lauderdale, there's a large colony of slash pine that's very well established, very mature. They're talking about cutting it all down so the panthers can have a place to practice hockey, but that's another story. But there are about 25 good-sized colonies of Encyclia tempensis growing in the slash pine around War Memorial Auditorium. So if you're ever in town and you want to see what it looks like in nature, that you can go there, and they're really cool.
Excellent. And you have your contact information up there because we received a couple requests for the best way to get in touch with you. Hopefully there are municipalities and other such places
Yeah.
that will be picking you up on.
Yeah, just give me a buzz, or my mail works well, or you can text me. Texting works well. Give me a call, whatever. Like I said, we're really actively looking for partners for this coming year. We do have orchids. The last 2 years, we did not have enough plants. We did not have the number of plants that people wanted. And so everybody, we kind of allocated stuff and tried to make everybody happy. And this year, so far, we're able to give everybody what they want. I am expecting that we will be sold out by the summertime. So, if you want to do a project, let me know and we can start talking about it. It's kind of a limited thing. I don't think these plants are ever going to be like in the trade because they take too long to grow. We bought when we bought these from Home Depot, these tempensis, like I said, in 2015, I guess. And I went back the next year and I asked if I could buy 100 more because I thought, they were really nice plants. And it was a special order thing. And they called up the nursery that was growing them. And the nursery said, oh, we don't grow those anymore. They're too slow. There's no demand. So we just you can't buy them. We don't grow them. So these plants are not I don't think going to be in the trade. And, we're doing this. The Orchid Society is doing this. And as long as I'm around, I hope I'll be doing it. But it's not a forever kind of thing. So it's, it takes years. We've got tens of thousands of orchids in a greenhouse and it costs money to keep that going. And so now is a good time to do it if you're interested.
That kind of leads to the next question from Gerald. Do orchids need to be planted in mature trees or will a code-sized tree, so say a 12-foot tall tree, work?
I found actually that they do better in new trees than they do in old trees. The growth that's been up in Stunson, where we're putting them into trees that were planted 3 years ago, it's phenomenal how quickly they're attaching, and it's because the branches are pretty clean. There's not a lot of moss on them and a lot of just a lot of stuff. And if you go to a mature live oak, it's not like you're looking at wood. When you're looking at a branch, there's all kinds of mosses on it, and there's resurrection fern, there's fern roots going all through it, and oftentimes there's actually like a layer of organic material on top of the bark. And so when you're planting these onto a mature tree like that, you actually kind of want to scrape away that organic material so that the roots for the orchid can actually get to the bark of the tree, of the branch. So actually planting on, I think, new or relatively freshly planted trees it's certainly easier. And in my experience, it's been more successful. There's less competition for them, and it's an easier install, and they just do better. So it's not to say that you can't put them into the old trees. If that's what you've got, that's what you do. But it's not at all a concern. It's actually beneficial to go into a newer plant.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Rich, I thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. Got
Right.
a lot of really good positive feedback and some interest that I hope passes on to you. I know Thad with Weston had a very positive experience. He's the one that kind of introduced us.
Yeah, thank you, Thad. I saw you were logged in somewhere. Thank you. And Sue, if you're there, thank you also. Sue Mitchell-Grigg is my colleague in the Orchid Society, and she's been helping with the project at Weston. And Thad is the director of landscaping for Weston. We did a project with him last year. Looking forward to doing more this year. So thank you all very much. If you do have any questions, there's my contact information, and just reach out. I'd be glad to help.
Rich, again, thank you. We truly appreciate it. There's a resounding round of applause. It's just virtual and you can't really hear it, but
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
thank you. And I would ask all the members to hold on for 1 minute. We'll let Rich go and
Stop my sharing and say goodbye. Yep.
bye.
Leave.
Rich, how do I get back on here?
Okay, let me see.
Hang on, folks, we're coming.
We're gonna play. Okay, you have video on, yeah.
Oh, maybe we're being seen.
No, but why can't I change to, oh, because I gotta do it from up here. Oops,
Oh, I saw us.
I found the
There
right
we go.
place. Pen. Let's see if that works.
All right, we're back on again.
That is good.
Thank you all. Interesting meeting, to say the least. Really good information from both presenters. I had a request to check with Lynn and see his PowerPoint presentation could be shared with y'all. And if he doesn't mind, then I will do that so that you can at least see and have that information. And then at a later date, we'll ask Lynn to come back when he's going to do his palm portion, and he can kind of recover some of the hardwood information. So again, you'll get it, because for the years past, and I've known Lynn for a very long time, for the years past, Lynn's been by far one of our most popular speakers. He is a wealth of information. And I always judge that from the live presentations with when I see people taking pictures of the slides that he's putting up. So I know that that is information we all really, really want to have better access to. So we'll have him back and he'll be able to share that. Plus, Lynn is the author of several books out there on plant nutrient deficiencies. I suggest you look some of those up. One is coming back into reprint, so they will be out there. Then lastly, one other thing, this is the virtual, and we're learning. I was talking to Richard, and we're trying to make sure that all of you that are certified LIAF members and want the CEU, we believe they are going to be tracked from the website you signed in on. If you are a certified LIAF member and like a plan B so that you don't run into problems, I would ask that you go ahead and use that text box and send a message saying, hey, this is Diana Berkelli, I'm on, please issue me LIAF CEUs, because we know we'll be able to capture that. The other ones we'll just kind of have to see on. Outside of that, that is really it. Thank you for attending. Appreciate it. We're going to go back to the monthly meetings the last Thursday of every month. We are going to stay virtual most all of 21 and probably all of 21. So hopefully everybody is remaining safe, and please go on the webpage. That's where we're going to drive everything. Pay your dues. Look for information that's there. That's the best way to keep informed with what's going on. Outside of that, great seeing you all. Have an excellent day and stay safe. Thanks.